So those who have just joined in, if you're able to see a poll pop up on your screen, please do fill it. And if you're not able to see, please let me know as well. Okay. We can begin, and I will quickly end the poll now. So this was just like a quick thing that, 1 second, we can look at the results, and you'll also get a glimpse of what you've answered and what what everyone here today has responded with. And while other participants are pouring in, welcome. Welcome to Atma webinars. My name is Beda, and some of you may have already seen me in the previous webinars. I'm a consultant at Atma, and I'll be your host for today. Atma webinars is something that we've been doing since 2017 as a platform to exchange knowledge, to build capacity and understanding in the sector, and share practical experiences, expertise with each other. We take on a variety of topics across different OD areas like HR, finance, fundraising, communications. And you can find all of these past webinars of ours in a YouTube channel that we have. We'll share the link to the YouTube channel on the chat box as well. And we have dedicated playlists there for the different OD areas. So you can always take a look at that. Today, our topic is the changing CSR landscape in India. And I'm sure many of us here have a lot of questions and a lot of curiosities around this topic. So today we have with us Sumit Tayal, who is the CEO of Give, India's leading giving platform, who will break down this whole enigma around CSR giving for us. Sumit comes experience across sectors, having worked in consulting, private equity, and operational leadership. He joined Give as a volunteer and then stayed on to drive its mission of making giving bigger and better. And his focus at Give is on building trust and enabling meaningful giving for CSR and for individual givers. And you'll hear more from Sumit throughout the session. But before I hand over to him, please note that we'll have a dedicated section towards the end of the session, 20-30 minutes for question and answers. But in the meantime, please feel free to use the chat box to drop in your questions as and when they come. And along with your thoughts, your experiences, anecdotes, whatever you'd like to share. We will have the session predominantly in English. But if anybody requires translation in Hindi, please let us know and we'll try our best to provide that translation on the chat box. So without further ado, I invite Sumit to please kickstart this very exciting topic for us.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And welcome everyone. We are at 3:10. I know we have a 4 o'clock hard stop, and I definitely want to keep enough time at the end for questions to come in. It's a topic that always elicits a ton of questions. So we'll keep enough time for that. But very quickly, let me just also introduce my colleague Aditi, who's been with Give now for several years, is part of our strategy team, and was the core author of this report. Pretty much everything we talk about will be an extract from our Thus Spoke India Inc. report that came out earlier this year. And Aditi was the one who practically wrote most of it.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon.
So all the tough questions go to her. The easy ones stay with me. Right? Okay, let's get started. I'm going to use a set of slides. And I'll try and focus on the key parts and keep all of the questions till the end. It might just be more efficient for the time that we have, which I hope is okay. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Are you able to see this? Aditi, you can?
Yes.
All right. So quick expectation setting on what are we discussing. My intent is that by the end of this session, you will have a better appreciation of the big picture of CSR, what it is, how it behaves, what it's trying to do. We will also talk about why it's important from the perspective of fundraising, right? And that's kind of an obvious question, but there are nuances to it, which we'll go into. I'm assuming that a large number of folks on the webinar today are people who are actively involved in fundraising in some or the other way inside their organizations, right? So we'll focus more on the fundraising aspect, less on everything else. But what we will not do, number one, I won't go into what's wrong with CSR because that's a topic that can take a few hours by itself. It's super interesting, but it has no value for a fundraiser. So whatever might be wrong with CSR, it will take care of itself like everything else in the world, but it's not going to help you meet your fundraising goals for next year. We will also not, I won't be able to tell you how to successfully raise money from CSR. Like how do you get more grants, or how do you get people to respond, or how do you open new relationships? So we won't go into the, for lack of a better word, the sales process, because every organization does it their own way. And there's enough written about it, right? There's no new value that I'll be able to add here. We'll keep those two pieces out, but everything else we will touch along the way. And I'll try and keep this to the next 25, 30 minutes at the most. Moving to the first part, whatever we discuss today is coming from these data sources. This year, we interviewed 27 CSR leaders. Each of them represent an organization that is in the top 200 in India for CSR spending. We also did a survey with 78 non-profit leaders and a survey with 47 CSR leaders. These are all people who featured in our interviews this year or the last year, right? And all of them, again, are from the top 200. In addition to that, we actually downloaded, analyzed, and structured the CSR2 forms for the top 200 companies. This is data that's available to anyone, but it's just extremely hard to organize logically. That work happened, giving us a lot more insight into what was under the hood when it came to CSR reporting. And of course, all of this put together is all of the charts and graphs that you'll see in the subsequent slides. Large, growing, and concentrated, right? And let's break up each of these three pieces into some numbers. This chart is a very common chart. Many people have published it. It comes in every second news article about CSR. But let's go a little deeper on what it actually shows. In the next 10 years, we will be at 1.2 lakh crores a year of CSR spending. That would compete with several large government schemes that exist today. So while we are at 35,000 crores today, and by itself, that's not a crazy large number, the minute you cross a lakh crores, you're actually now talking about a source of funding that can match some of the grants, some of the schemes that governments run, at least at a state level. Right? What is more important is if you see it's actually grown at almost 15% in the last 10 years. There is no other segment of funding for social impact in India that comes even close. Individual giving is certainly growing at under 10%. That's retail giving. HNI giving is also, to the best of my knowledge, under 10%. If those two segments are under 10% and this is 15%, it is very logical to know that in the next 10 years, this will become a disproportionately large segment. So not only is it large today, it will become larger as a percent of the total pie in the coming years. So if you're a nonprofit fundraising professional, this will be your number one source of funds by a mile. The next segment will be much lower. That's the hidden meaning, which is what I want to leave you with. It is important today. It will only double in its importance and triple in its size by the time we get to the end of this decade. Today, we think of CSR as large, but especially if you're a CSR professional more than a non-profit professional. If you're a CSR professional, it's useful to remember all of CSR spending today adds up to 1.5% of the government's spending on the social sector. This is not the government's total budget. This is what they spend on the social sector. It should be government social sector expenditure, not service. And these are data points that the government publishes. So CSR may be large by non-profit standards, but it's certainly small by the standards of the overall economy. It's 1.5%. It therefore cannot be expected to radically change India alone by itself, but it certainly can play a lot of other roles. When we talk about the word scale, if you constrict yourself to the non-profit space, CSR does connotate scale, but if you look at the larger picture, it doesn't. It's actually a very small component. So large, growing, small in front of the government, but extremely concentrated. This chart has three parts to it. The first layer are the top 200 companies who were the larger piece of the respondents to this report, right? These folks contribute 51% of all CSR spending, just 200 of them. The next 300, which means the top 500, takes the 51% to 62%. And the rest of it comes from 26,000 companies. So if you're a fundraising professional, you need to be able to clearly decide where in these three segments do you lie. What it takes to operate here is very different from what it takes to raise funds here. This is somewhere in between, but this is more or less a mirror of this. So I would think of it as the top 500 and everybody else. Okay. What's also interesting to note is even in the top 500, look at the average project sizes. It's somewhere in the range of 1.5 to 2 crores. If I combine these two as a weighted average, I land somewhere a little less than 2 crores. And if you look at everybody else, we're talking about an average project size of 26 lakhs. To put it mildly, it's a lot of small projects. This 2 crores may sound large as a number, but when you think of multi-year projects from companies that have an average CSR spending of more than 25 crores a year, that's what this group represents. 2 crores is not a very large number. Yeah. So it's extremely concentrated in terms of companies, but extremely diffused in terms of number of projects. Tends to do a lot of small projects. We keep hearing about how CSR spending is concentrated in certain areas, right? Only 5 states get all the money, etc., etc. I'm not going into that. I'm talking about in this slide on when we think underserved, two examples that come to mind are the Northeast and aspirational districts. There are many other things that are underserved, but these are two specific examples. If you look at the Northeast, 74% of total CSR funding for the Northeast came from just the top 100 companies. In fact, just 8 companies were 60%. Same story for aspirational districts. 73% came from the top 100 companies, 37% from just 7 of those top 100 companies. This includes PSUs, by the way, who are a big driver of this trend. What it means is when we look at how many states get what money, we miss the larger picture, which is that at the very top of the CSR ecosystem, which is the top 200 companies, there is a conscious effort to go beyond their restricted geographies and to spend on things that are underserved or national priorities. That is visible in these two examples, that the top 100 are starting to make an effort. But what is also visible is that that effort is restricted to the top 100. It hasn't percolated down. Why am I going through this? if you're a fundraising professional, if you're somebody who's trying to understand where will the money come from for the next 5 years for your nonprofit, you need to factor this in. If I was in your place, I would not assume that underserved geographies or themes would suddenly see a spike in funding. They will not. This is a very gradual process. After so many years, we've got to the point where the top 100 are starting to do it. What they do, the rest of the sector follows. That is visible in many other trends. So if this has started today, it will reflect in more companies and in a wider adoption, but over time. So in my near-term fundraising plan, I would not factor in any major spikes or significant change in this situation, right? That's a factor of the market. It's not something that can be influenced in the very short term. Let's look at the other side of the story. All of this was about how the CSR market operates or how the CSR market is structured when you look at it from the side of the companies who are spending. Let's look at it from the nonprofit side. This is my favorite slide from the entire report. And by the way, the report's available on our website. So, if you want to go into the details, you can. It's around 25, 30 slides similar to this. What our poll at the beginning of this webinar said is what this slide says. Okay. This is coming from a survey of 78 NPO leaders. Every single report I have ever seen on India's NPO sector corroborates this. And the poll that we just did also corroborates this. So I'm fairly confident in saying that the sample size may be small, but the message is real. Look at the first chart. The way to read it is, so medium, small, medium, large is the size of the nonprofits. Here, medium is defined as 5 to 20 crores annual budget. Small is less than 5 crores, large is more than 20 crores. Let's take medium. 19% of medium-sized nonprofits got 75% of their funding from CSR. Okay, that is what this box means. Another 31% of medium-sized nonprofits got between 50 to 75% of their annual funding from CSR. That means half of all medium-sized nonprofits got more than 50% of their funding from CSR. That's how strongly dependent they are on CSR. And this is mid-size. Large nonprofits, 70% of them get more than half their funding from CSR. Even under 5 crores, almost 30% of them, 27% to be precise, get more than half their funding from CSR. Okay. So when we talk about dominance, it doesn't matter how large individual giving is or HNI giving is or whatever giving is. Finally, where is the money coming from? It's coming from CSR. And that is extremely visible in all of these data points. It has already become the single largest source of funding for nonprofits. And there is another hidden message behind this. If it is already the largest source, and if it is growing faster than all other segments, when you look at the additional money that comes into a nonprofit in any given year, when you grow from 10 crores to 15 crores, the extra 5 crores that comes, in most cases, almost the entire extra 5 crores will end up being CSR. So it's half of their budget today, but when they move from here to here, a disproportionate amount of that extra capital will come from CSR. That's the message that I'm trying to leave. So if if you're looking at fundraising, a large portion of your incremental fundraising is likely to be CSR. Okay, that's the short takeaway out of all of this charts and graphs. However, now look at the chart on the right side. While most of your money will come from CSR, which is what this said, it won't come from the same set of companies. As you go from small to medium to large, your number of donors keeps increasing. In case of large NPOs, everybody has more than 10 donors. In case of medium, 62% have more than 10 donors. No CSR donor, funder, will keep increasing their allocation year by year just because you're growing. In fact, they're all going to diversify, and that is why project sizes are small. As non-profits grow, they have to raise money from multiple CSR funders, not rely on whoever gave them money in the past. That should continue, but it won't grow as much as you're growing. Okay, you have to keep diversifying, keep adding more and more funders. That's what the chart on the right means. I'm guessing for most of you, this also correlates pretty well to what your actual experience on the ground is when you're preparing a list of who to reach out to and looking at which grants actually came in. While we know what CSR may not do well, here is what non-profit leaders say CSR does well. Okay. It's the set of messages that don't appear in any news article, which is why I put them here. Because if you are going to work with CSR, it's useful to understand what they actually do well and leverage that in your fundraising. Number one, CSR visibility inside the company is increasing pretty rapidly. And that's been our experience as well. We work with more than 50 companies on their CSR work in some or the other way. Visibility of CSR, which used to be largely compliance at one point of time, is definitely going up significantly. Therefore, their ability to influence is much higher. For all the painful compliance that comes in and the templates and the reporting, the fact is most non-profit leaders acknowledged that it has actually helped them set up their processes better, even though it has been painful. Lastly, most non-profit leaders are saying more and more CSRs are open to the idea of multi-year giving rather than single year. Longer term projects are increasing. Most large projects now tend to be longer term. They tend to be at least 2-3 years and tend to get repeated after that. India's top 200 companies set the example, the rest of them follow. Okay. What examples are they setting? Almost every single large company that has a proper CSR team and a CSR strategy is choosing to do less things with larger amounts of money. So if they have 20 crores to spend and today they do 20 projects, they're all asking themselves, how do we pick one or two core themes and concentrate most of our spending on that? Does not mean they have to work with less number of nonprofits. It means most of their work will be focused on one theme. For example, a theme is not just healthcare. A theme is vision correction. So more and more large companies tend to have flagship projects that get a dominant share of their spending and work with many nonprofits in one single area because it's just better allocation of money and more efficient for them to do it that way, right? So few large bets, also a greater appetite for direct execution, where they'll work with vendors or they'll work with other partners beyond just nonprofits to actually execute projects themselves. The very largest companies are doing this more and more often. Okay. And corporate foundations are becoming more common, which actually is a good thing for nonprofits because the compliance overhead on that is relatively lower as compared to working with a corporate directly rather than through their foundation. The last slide that I'm going to spend any real time on today, and I'll let you read this. CSR leaders say that these things matter to them. Okay. We all hear it. We all know it when we go fundraising, but this is putting a number to it. If you're looking for grants and you have the ability to project one of these factors in addition to the impact that you'll be creating, it does make a difference to the person on the other side of the table. Because for their internal priorities, this does matter. Okay. Employee engagement, be it through volunteering or events or any of those factors, matters to 87% of all CSR leaders. Brand perception amongst the people that they're serving, amongst their supply chain, their suppliers, their customers, It matters how they think of that company based on its CSR work. So branding is not just about putting up a board. Branding is also about how does it rub off on the larger corporate brand. Okay. Social license to operate is, of course, the original reason why the CSR law discussion started right in the beginning, right? Won't go further into that. The point of this slide is, if I was in a fundraising position, I would think a little harder about how to incorporate some of these in my fundraising strategy. The work that you do is great, but so is the work done by everybody else. So if everybody is doing great work, these are potential levers to differentiate. Okay. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is, we do know that CSR tends to fund things that are tried and tested. Some of them are starting to fund things that are not tried and tested, but it's early days yet. Also, this tends to be more towards incubators and accelerators rather than direct nonprofit funding. Last slide. 30%. Let's look at the first one, this one. These are all misconceptions. Okay. Overheads for a nonprofit cannot be more than 5% or 10% of the grant value. 30% of companies actually believe that that is the law. It isn't. Nowhere in the law does it say what should be the overheads percentage of your non-profit partner. It says 5% will be your limit for your own team and your own expenses. 95% has to be impact. 5% can be your overheads as a company. This 5%, 10% is just a historical benchmark that people use. It's not coming from the law. What's useful to know is 30% of CSR does believe that that happens, which means communication has to be better. It doesn't mean something's right or wrong. Like every industry in the world, like every function in the world, there will always be some amount of misunderstanding. This one is a pretty important one. And therefore, your ability to communicate and therefore position overheads the right way, at least the fact that it's not the law that says it, it may be market practice. Similarly, 30% of CSR believes they cannot work with for-profit vendors for their CSR spending. My suspicion is if I ask the same question to non-profit leaders, it will be more than 30% who will say they can't. Like CSR can't work with for-profit. But the reality is the law never said you can't work with for-profits. You're allowed to do direct projects where you can engage with anybody. Only if you choose the route of working with a non-profit as an implementation partner, then you can only work with people who have a CSR1 form, which is non-profits. Okay. A misconception that is not present just on the CSR side, but also heavily on the non-profit side. Last but not the least, thankfully, only 20% believe the law says you have to be in your own geography. The law doesn't say that. The law only advises. Companies can spend wherever they want. The only reason we did this slide was to just highlight that even 10 years into the game, there are misconceptions which can be easily addressed by better communication. And with that, I'm going to end this here. Happy to go back and focus on any individual aspect or take whatever questions that are there and go deeper into this. Sending it back to you, Bedushi, for you to kind of moderate the questions the way you think is right.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think we already have one question from Shrikant. You have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Sir, great presentation. I mean, a lot of excellent points you have made. Can we go back to the perception point wherein you said that we can engage for-profit enterprises? Could you just elaborate? I mean, how is it possible?
Yeah. See, the law says there are two methods to do a CSR project, either through an implementation partner or as a direct execution project. And when you file your CSR2 form as a company, you have to choose for every project you have to mention, is it direct or implementation partner? If you go the implementation partner route, that implementation partner must have a CSR1 form, which means they have to be a non-profit. They in turn can work with any for-profit as a vendor for getting the project done, right? If you want to get a building built, you need a civil contractor. But if companies choose to go the direct execution route, then they directly can work with for-profit vendors. This could be for-profit skilling vendors, for example, for a skilling program, or like I said, construction, or pretty much any other service that is needed. So it's the law doesn't say you can only do this or that. It gives you both options. You can choose which one to go with.
So just like any other contract, I can engage a private limited entity and I can transfer funds to them.
Yes, and 30% of CSR already does that. But then you have to be clear that that is a direct execution project where in a conceptual sense, the company is saying, I am taking ownership of this project and its output, as compared to the implementation route where I am funding and my non-profit partner is taking ownership of the output.
Okay, just one final thing. So let us say I'm going to install some kind of solar street lights. I directly call upon a vendor who is manufacturing the solar street lights, and I directly place the order on him. And while the ground level execution is done by my in-house CSR team.
Very much possible. Only the reporting for that is different when you file your CSR forms as compared to when you do it with you're working with a non-profit.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shrikant. We had a question on the chat box from Jasmeet asking about what government social service expenditure means or includes. If you could elaborate a little bit.
So the data that you see in that chart, Jasmeet, is coming from the economic survey that is published by the government every year. It basically looks at what center and state government spend on things like education, healthcare, direct benefit transfers, and so on. So it excludes all of the administrative overhead of the government, and it focuses on all the schemes and spending that is focused on better quality of life for people who need that support. That's the simplest way to define it. But a breakup of that is actually given in the economic survey, and it's an annual number. So it's actually pretty easily available data.
We also have two questions from Kiran Ravrani. Would you like to unmute and ask both the questions about the geographical limitation as well as the CSR one?
Thank you. Thank you. First of my question has covered by sir in the slide of misconception. So that's clear. And for the second, sir has explained that CSR1 we can take as a direct or implementation partner. So is there any chances to take both or only we can take on one direct or implementation? So
Any given project has to be one or the other.
great. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we have another question from Sanjay on the chat box asking, is there any limit or threshold on administrative and overhead costs imposed by the CSR law for project funding?
Sanjay, I assume that you mean if a corporate is giving a grant to you, is there a limit in the law that says that they have to give you X% as administrative or overhead cost? Is that your question?
Yes, that is what I mean. Like generally, as a thumb rule, we usually go with 10 to 15%, but some corporates even come back and throw us misinterpretation of something written in the law saying 5%, whereas that's actually a misinterpretation of what's written. So if you could clarify or elaborate further, how do we address this when this is being thrown at us? Because obviously with 5%, we can't deliver. I mean, no NGO will be able to deliver quality stuff with just a 5% admin. Generally, at least a 10% bare minimum is what we believe is reasonable. In fact, even that is low, but at the bare minimum, we go with 10%. this is generally what the markets believe. Many of them believe 15-20%, but that begins to be thought of by corporates that you're charging too much.
So the CSR law only defines one definition of overhead, which is what a company can spend on its own expenses for running its CSR program. That's 5%. 95% is meant for programs and 5% is meant for their team and the costs of that team for overseeing, managing, executing the projects. The law doesn't say anything more than that. So the 5% is what companies have to manage their expenses in. The remaining 95, the law doesn't say what that 95 is composed of and whether it's for, frankly, there is no definition even of overheads. What is a non-profit overhead and what isn't? Is fundraising an overhead? Is senior oversight an overhead? Is monitoring evaluation overhead? There is no such definition. The CSR law does not get into that space. It says nothing. It's silent on it. So all of these 5%, 10%, 15% numbers on how non-profits budgets need to be structured are market benchmarks. Certainly not the law.
Related to that, I have one question. So when you spoke about 5%, it means it's all up to market based and all. So what actually should be done when we are making a budget? Should we show that as a 5%, should we show it or we should showcase under some other headings? That's my question.
I'm going to direct you to one study that has been my source of learning about this and using it for my own purpose, which is the Pay What It Takes study by Britspan. It's publicly available. We have also referred it to in our report.
Can you just repeat the word?
Pay What It Takes.
Okay, pay what
PWIT.
it takes. Yeah.
Pay What It Takes. If you search for Pay What It Takes by Britspan, you'll find a link to the report.
Okay.
The crux of the matter lies not so much in 5 or 10. It lies in which costs are considered non-programmatic. It's a longer debate, which is why I'm not going in there, but that study says everything that I can say. Most of my information actually comes from there.
Thank you.
Sir, good afternoon. Regarding my CSR funding, because we are working in a developed region in Bangalore, like a lot of refinery companies are there. But in point of the rural sector in our area, it's a kind of developing, but the projects are not reaching. So there is a like misconception in the foreign funders that recently we heard of. South India is developed because most of the people are developed and went to other nations and all. So the funding is getting lesser here. So we would like to compile with the CSR projects. So most of the projects for Dakshina Kannada or in Mangalore is limited CSR. So uh, how we explain them that there is a need of urgency in projects. So what kind of data we can show to the companies?
I would start with the list of aspirational districts, which includes districts in Dakshin Kannada, right? Saw that map that we had on one of the slides, Northeast and aspirational districts. The spread is fairly uniform across the country. So I would focus, I mean, this data is again fairly easily available at a district level. The level of development either through HDI or through various other indicators, and Niti Aayog themselves publishes this fairly regularly, the state of development at a district level. I would probably use that, Adrian. But to be honest, this is also a question, the answer to this question is also dependent on who's on the other side of the table and what their concern is. Data isn't the problem. There's enough of it available to say that for every developed locality in any given state or district, there is one next door which isn't.
Jahangir had two questions. If you'd like to go ahead, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the brilliant presentation and the opportunity to ask a question. So I think the first question is answered on admin expenses, which is not about. I mean, I had a practical experience of corporate saying that it's 5%. So there are moments when we don't want to lose even 95% of the funds just to fight for remaining 10-15%. So we kind of agreed, but it is the link you have given for Brisbane. I think I'll read and try to refer it. It's a reference point for me. Thank you for that. And I also get an hint, maybe like if you can answer it. I mean, maybe for example, I am raising funds for the organization called Tara Child Protection and Empowerment. So you have a team of fundraising and communication people who are working for across the program of Tara. So there might is it a way for us, for example, out of 4 people, we can have one person being budgeted in one program so that those admin expenses can be decreased. Is it a way yeah? I mean, I got a hint. I'm not very sure about this.
So, as long as you can clearly demonstrate allocation of relevant expenses to a project, which does not deviate from whatever budgets you have agreed with the corporate, of course, most fundraising or communication professionals will not be dedicated to a project. They'll always be shared, which means it has to be an allocation. Your finance team should be able to defend that when they go through the customary, FUCs and audits and all that. But it's fairly common for, especially for communication, to be on an allocated basis and not a direct basis for project costing.
I got it. Thank you so much. And I have a second question. Since you have said that it is not mandated by the law for a corporate to work in a designated location, but when we face those scenarios in practical life, see, there are plenty of non-profits working in every region of the country, and wherever a corporate want to do some CSR project, those NGO are available. Right. So what is a good way of convincing those corporates to come and work with Tara rather than working in a geography like Bangalore?
Let me turn the question around, Jahangir. It's a very valid question, but I am going to turn it around and that doesn't make it a good answer, but I'll still turn it around. Like any other transaction, if a person is making a decision to buy A or B or C, right, they will make that choice based on their priorities and not the priorities of A or B or C. Fair? That's natural. Nothing wrong with that. I'll take you back to the slide where 87% say what happens to my employees matters. Another 60% says what happens to my immediate supply chain, my suppliers and my customers matters. Now, how do I just, as a CSR head, if I have 20 good options in my backyard where my employees can engage, where my suppliers can be involved, where my customers will see, and where the community in that area who is most important for me will benefit, if I have those choices, how do I go into a boardroom and say I'm going to ignore all this and instead go do something else? Which, by the way, was also not ever the intent of the CSR law. It's CSR is 1.5% of total spending. That 1.5% is not going to change everything, right? So what the government basically intended was, and I've now heard this from people who were involved in making that law, the intention was do your little bit at least close to where you are. That's why that line was included, but as an advisory and not as a mandate. If I put myself in the shoes of a CSR head who is presenting to their board every quarter, I think I'll struggle to explain as well that if I have enough opportunity to make a difference next door, why shouldn't I? So most companies that spend in aspirational districts or Northeast or things where they are not present themselves are folks who are allocating a small percentage in the name of national priorities. So from a 100 crore budget, I allocate 5 crores. Even that's large, but it's 5 out of 100.
Yeah. Got you. Thank you so much. I have a last quick question. Not will take much time. I have a connected question, personal to my organization. We are an organization working into the area of child protection and empowerment for last 16 years, and I can call that we are a niche organization because we are limited to Delhi, and that also a part of the Delhi. So for an organization like us, which have a budget of within 10 CR, what kind of corporate should we be approaching? Because I understand that 51% of top 200 companies are investing 51% of CSR spend in a lot of areas, and they are majorly focusing on Northeast and especially districts also. So where should we be moving in as an organization?
I would always start with all the organizations that I would not worry about size. I would start with geography. I would not even start with themes. I would always start with geography when I'm building a list of who to target. People who have some connection to the geography in which you're operating. It could be because of their supplier base. It could be because of their own location. It could be nearby to where they are, etc., etc. It could be any of that. Once you've applied that filter, I would go to the theme filter. I would still not apply the size filter because people with a 500 crore CSR budget also do 30 lakh grants.
Yes.
Yeah. And people with 2 crore CSR budgets also do 30 lakh grants.
Yes.
So the shortlisting is much better to do by geography and theme first rather than by size. But once you've done the geography and the theme, go for the largest because those are the shortest cycles. Yeah. And those are also the ones where, money has to be available for it to be given. So even if it's a 1% round off there, a 30 lakh is less than a percent. It's as simple as that, right? So that's the sequence I would go with.
Thank you so much. That helps a lot.
Thanks.
We have a question from Ravi Kumar on around PSU sector. Ravi, if you would like to pose the question yourself.
Yeah. Good afternoon to you all. It was a wonderful meet that we have today. I had been to a PSU sector in Maharashtra, one of the companies, thinking that since in that area within 20 kilometers of the company, we have been doing a lot of Zilla Parishad schools renovation projects. I happened to meet them in one of the CSR Time Summit and went there to meet them. They had called me and went there. They said they have never given to any NGO so far because as a PSU, if they select a particular NGO, they'll be under audit query. They have to go through tender, then select the NGOs which befit them under the tender, those who apply, and then select them. If not, they say we don't want to implement all this thing. We don't have this time also. We give it to the local PWD department of Government of Maharashtra or whatever. They do the implementation of the civil projects, renovation of the Zilla Parishad school in Adivasi areas and rural areas. And we are saying we will repair and give for 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs, 5 lakhs, whatever is the cost of actual repairing. They say, no, we don't go believe in repairing. We demolish the building and construct a new one, even if it costs 90 lakhs, 1 crore. So we are put off, in the sense that they say how you present your case, we will see, but it will not go through from our head office because we cannot identify you as with the implementing partner unless we go through a tender route or you get associated with the local education department head, get yourself approved, and we will sign a tripartite agreement. And then we don't mind giving you the money. So
Yeah.
in PSU sector, because last 10 years I have not gone into the PSU at all, nor even borrowed government funds, nor central government funds for our projects. We have been only dependent on CSR projects. CSR funding, 95%, 98%. And all of them were from multinational companies, 15, 16 multinational companies we have.
Yeah.
We thought, why not go through this? Because they have enough of funds, PSUs, hundreds of crores they have for CSR funding every year. But they are saying we will give it to PWD. And PWD, as you know, will be a 5-year plan for them. Any project gets delayed. They have a plan it, do it, implement it.
So what's the question, Ravi?
So
I
my
agree with
question is how to enter into this CSR, getting money from the PSU companies, as simple as a multinational company or an Indian corporate sector.
No one company will be as simple as the other. That's the fact, right? Even
I
if
agree.
you've raised money from 20 MNCs, they all behave in their own way.
No, we take sometimes 2 years to convince them to get a project,
Correct.
even 5 lakhs rupees also.
So all I would say is that while this is the approach taken by the PSU you've spoken to, open the annual report of any other PSU and you'll find a list of 100 nonprofits that they're funding. So like most companies, PSUs also go by whatever precedent has been set in the past, and it's not etched in stone. It's convenient, which is why they continue it, because any change is inconvenient for anybody, not just PSUs.
Yeah.
But enough PSUs also fund non-profits. So it's not restricted by the law. It's an operating procedure that they have chosen, and that too this PSU has chosen, not PSUs as a sector.
Mm-hmm. So there is still scope for us to
it's a selling
explore with other
process and a
PSUs.
gradual communication process like any other
Okay,
relationship.
that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you very much for this
Yeah.
advice.
Thank you, Ravi. We have another question from Chandan Verma. Chandan, if you would like to unmute and please go ahead.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much. Yeah. And thank you, Sumit. Very nice presentation. And I was going through it. And one of the question is, see, the market shows that underserved areas, underserved populations theme is not the priority of the large companies. While the NPOs think that that's the need of the sector, is that it should be addressed. And I attended one fundraising conference long back, which mentioned educate your donor, mobilize them towards the real cause. And we have tried to do this, and well, small tickets projects are less and long-term outcome-based projects are trending. So my question is, how do you think is it possible, and how can we change the market trends actually? And how much time do you think any policy change in it, if anything like that?
Don't have a good answer for you, Chandan, but I can give you a couple of pointers.
Yeah.
I first started getting involved in CSR 4 years back, right? I had no clue about it before that. 4 years back, long-term projects was a perpetual refrain. How do you get donors to commit to long-term projects? I just don't hear that so much anymore. Genuinely don't. Because gradually over time, messages percolate, seep, and become practice. And when 2 people start doing it, the next 3 are faster in adopting it. The first 2 are the hardest, right? It's the same thing. But there is a difference here. The whole concept of underserved geographies being funded, being put at the CSR door, I think is misplaced. Our report says it, and this is counterintuitive, the entire narrative out there. I read every single story that comes out. Why does CSR not serve state A or state B or sector A, sector B? 1.5% of total social sector spending is CSR. It can't replace the government. And CSR is being done by companies. The boards operates on it, right? The board is the final authority. How do you expect a company's behavior on CSR to be radically different from what their whole business strategy, which is like 99% of the company, is following? I don't think our goal should be, or rather our strategy as a non-profit should be to convey this message and make this the focus of our pitch, that give it because we are underserved, and that's important. It should be that because that message won't resonate. In the list of what matters to CSR, they want to align with national priorities, but no individual company is going to take that on their heads alone and say, I will be the first one to do it. They will finally focus on their customers, they'll focus on their employees, they'll focus on things that happen close to them, to communities that matter most to them, which is, like any other segment, like any other sector. So this one's going to be a much longer journey, if I had to take a guess. Long-term projects may have been a 5-7 year journey. I would think this would be much longer.
Yeah, thank you, Sumit. I interacted with few heads of the organization, and they said that the national programs, of course, are a priority, but at the same time, we cannot compete with the government. Let government spend lakhs of crores of rupee, and we have just few crores. So let our priorities be also be served. Yeah. Thank you, Sumit.
Thank you, Chandan. Shrikant had another question. Would you like to discuss it? Unmute and discuss it, Shrikant?
Maybe we'll keep this one as the last one, if that's okay, Bedashri.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because I know we are at 4 and folks may have to drop off.
We do have time until 4:30.
Oh, we do? Okay, great. Happy to go.
Sir, my question, like you were discussing about the act why CSR has been introduced. So I've gone through the act, and act says that government wants the corporates to be involved because they want the problem solving skills of corporates, the out of box thinking. But whether it is really happening, and is CSR trying to become a proxy government? Because we are seeing projects where ideally the government should do that, but then CSR is coming into picture. So that is one part. And second is uh, implementing CSR for quite some time at PS, Indian Oil. So can we do capacity building of our implementation partners under CSR? If we can, how do we put it across as a project?
So I'll pick the first one first, Shrikant. I go back to 1.5%. If anybody in 1.5% has any aspirations of swinging the remaining 98.5%, that's not going to happen. It's dead on arrival. Also, I have, in my limited experience, never come across CSR who was in any ways even remotely interested in replacing the government or doing what the government should have done. The approach by and large has been what's not happening, can we fill that gap? That seems to in fact be the dominant theme behind CSR. In most cases of saying we see this need or our partners are telling us there is this need. Ideally, though, a government should do everything under the sun, but that doesn't happen in any country in the world. The most developed ones also have spaces which are not addressed. Non-profits fundamentally, and definitely CSR is trying to fill those gaps. And it won't be able to do more than that. The amount is way too small. So that's the first part. I think the second part on capacity building is a nuanced problem because the CSR law, somewhere I forget the exact language, but it actually restricts funding for things that are not impact focused, but more in the nature of, so it restricts corpus, for example, specifically. Similarly, it does have some language around restricting capacity building alone as a project, right? So if a project is strictly about that, unlikely. But I do know of corporates. For example, Wipro is doing this very, very well, especially the ones who have corporate foundations. For all of their grantees, they organize capacity building exercises under the foundation as a theme running typically across years. And I've seen several companies choose to do this. But defining it as a CSR project itself may be a trouble. So I wouldn't do that. Yeah.
So one last question, because we don't get to often talk to you. Sir, how do I measure the outcomes and impact? I mean, monetary spending is one part, but how do I capture the impact? I think it is still a gray area. Do you have any suggestions how we can improve the measuring of outcomes and impact?
It's not more gray than any other sector. Like I'm talking about the development sector versus any other sector. Refining or for that matter, logistics or any other sector in the economy, right? There are fairly strong measurement techniques, frameworks available. The hope was that by mandating impact assessment for large projects, anything above 1 crore, some of those will actually be applied. To be fair, it's early days. And like all things that are in early days, it's been more of a, compliance job that let's get it done. But most nonprofits that are of any decent size will have a monitoring evaluation team with the ability to do quantitative baselines, midlines, endlines. If you take it further, it can go all the way to RCTs. But there are good agencies, highly qualified professionals available to do this. And most of them have a presence in India.
And
so
we can engage them as part of the admin itself, admin charges. We can onboard a consultant for that.
Two things. So if you're doing monitoring evaluation, this is an extension of monitoring evaluation, right? Measurement at each stage of what happened is part of the project itself. So it can definitely be part of the project budget itself. Post facto impact assessment actually has a separate allocation under the law of 2% of the project value. That is also available. But there is in fact a clarification in one of the FAQs that M&E is an integral part of the project, not an overhead. So you can definitely allocate from there.
Related to that, I wanted to know, you said M&E, monitoring and evaluation is an integral part. So can we show that in a budget when we are showing the programs and all?
I would. I mean, and there's a, like I said, there's an actual FAQ which says that monitoring and evaluation is a program expense.
Okay.
So if you just search for the CSR FAQs, there are only a couple of them. One of those has this clarification.
Okay.
And in any case, I mean, I would be surprised if you would get a lot of pushback on that. It is very much an integral part of how a project would get done and measured through the life cycle of the project.
Because we are already implementing, we do monitoring and evaluation at every stage.
Yeah.
And we have shown that as a component in our program. So I think this is a best to show, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely is.
Thanks for this, yeah.
Thank you. I think Archana also has a question on the chat box. Archana, would you like to directly address your question?
Hello. Hi, Sumit. This is Archana from Sakar Welfare Foundation. Can you hear me?
I can, Archana.
Yeah. So, Sumit, my question is that what the trend I observe is that many state governments are now coming up as calling it, although they call it CSR facilitation cells, but actually they're trying to, that's my observation. I may be wrong. They're making these CSR regulatory units in the state governments. Odisha was the one, Maharashtra is the one. Now Bihar has come up. Nagaland has a similar example. So what what is your take on this, whether it's going to actually facilitate the non-profits to get more and more CSR funding support, or it's going to create another level of bureaucracy and barriers for the non-profits?
To be honest, don't have a view, Archana. I think it's like every other structure. It depends on how it is run rather than on the structure itself. There are states where these cells have actually done a great job simply in being able to attract more attention on what the state needs. So in some cases, they've done a very good job on communication on the donor side. Also, in some cases, they've facilitated easy access for donors to projects. That also has happened, where the projects are actually non-profit run projects. But that being said, it's a wide spectrum. So honestly, don't have a view on it. Neither do have a view on how it will shape up. Pretty early days.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Archana. Does anyone else have any questions? And in the meantime, I can bring up some more questions that we had during registration. So we had a couple of very interesting questions come in, and I'll club some of these together because it's a long list. Yeah. So I think the first we can take is in terms of partnership expectations from CSRs. So we had a question come in regarding partnership expectations in terms of sustainability. And another question come in regarding whether companies are still interested in employee engagement activities with NGOs. So if they're truly, if they would truly like to invest in that. So if you could elaborate a little bit around that.
Deeply interested in employee engagement activities. I've yet to meet anybody who's not. So it's a very, very integral part of CSR. I would separate this from what are generally pure volunteering engagements. That's different from CSR. But the ability to add on employee engagement to what is first and foremost a CSR project is the one I'm talking about. And that only seems to be more and more and more preferred than not. So I think the second one has a very clear answer. The first one was about partnership expectations around sustainability. My own take on it is that it's an amorphous question. The sustainability question itself is an amorphous question. Very hard at the beginning of a project to say 3 years later, if you stop funding me, then what will happen? That is the core of the sustainability question, right? Can this project be sustained by itself in case I stop giving money? In a 3-year time frame, unlikely that any project will get there. But that being said, it's a question that has to be addressed. I haven't seen any great answers to be able to honestly give you an example because there aren't any. How would I know 3 years from now what will happen and how great everything will be at that time for donors to step away? It's a fair question to ask, but the answer is generally amorphous as much as the question is.
Thank you, Sumit. There are some more. Another interesting question is around whether, like, the future of CSR. Will CSR ever be replaced or mandate will be changed? What is the future of future giving looking like at the moment?
I'll address the part of how the future of giving is looking like. The first one, I have no clue, to be fair. But the future of giving is, if you segregate it in 3 segments, that's my mental model of giving. You have the individual givers, people like you and me giving 500 rupees, 1,000 rupees, 1,500 rupees as a donation, one-off, whenever we want to, or even on a regular basis. That's individual giving. Then you have HNIs who might be giving a 10 lakh, 20 lakh, 1 crore check. And then you have corporates. The 4th segment is foreign funding, which is anyway gradually declining over time. So let's leave that out. The first 3 are equal in size today. The first 3 will not be equal in size 10 years from now. CSR would have practically doubled its share at the expense of both HNI and individual giving. Wealth in India is growing faster than giving is. So we are earning more, but giving less as a percentage of what we earn as individuals. Okay. Me as an individual will earn 10% more this year than I did last year, but what I give will not increase by 10%. It will increase, but not by 10%. Okay. That's one part of the story. However, in CSR, the government has mandated what I have to give as a percent of a company's earnings. So if companies grow 10%, CSR grows 10%. But in individuals, if individuals grow 10%, giving does not grow 10%. And that is why CSR share of the total pie will keep on increasing. Unless our behavior as individuals globally, it's not just India. This isn't about Indians, this is about people. So unless behavior of humans changes significantly, CSR is going to be a larger pie.
I think that explains a lot. That's and I would agree. We have some more, and I think I'll ask this question, and then Ritika, you can go next. Is that okay?
My question was just connected with whatever he just shared. I was just wondering.
Oh,
why
then
did we
please,
not
sure.
Yeah, I was
Sure,
just
sure.
wondering
Please go
why.
ahead.
I was just wondering why did we not count philanthropy in the pie?
That's HNIs. Philanthropy is what I would club as HNIs.
Ritika, did you have another question? Okay.
No, that is it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. There's another question from a CSR specialist who's asking, how do smaller budget CSRs make the best impact portfolio long term? Now from a CSR angle.
I think it's actually a very good question, given that 26,000 of, given that 25,500 of the 26,000 companies that operate in CSR in India actually are small, right? By count, it's 99%. If you're a smaller company, my suggestion would be to pick your theme and not stretch too thin. The easiest thing in the world to do is to do 20 projects of 10 lakhs each, based on 20 recommendations that came in from employees, board members, friends, everybody, and distribute across the board. That strategy may work for individuals, but as a company, you also are accountable to demonstrate impact for what you've spent. You can't just spend and say something happened. You have to be able to also go back and say to your board, whose money, shareholder money at the end of the day being spent, you have to be able to go back and say, with this money, X happened, whatever that might be. And that makes a lot more sense to do if you concentrate your spending in one or two core themes. Build a network of nonprofits, build a portfolio of nonprofits getting those grants, but inside those themes. Because what you're able to do is you're able to do far better monitoring and evaluation. You're able to do far, far better communication, employee engagement. Even thinking design strategy is way better when you're doing it over a 1 crore budget than you're doing over a 10 lakh budget. Which can then reflect in all your 10 projects under that theme. That's okay. I'm not saying do large projects, but I am saying do large themes. And not more than one or two, ideally, because small companies do not have the bandwidth to go deep into more than one or two themes at a time.
Thank you. Thank you, Sumit. Maybe two more questions and we can close, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So one question is around the CSR landscape in terms of the increasingly newer frameworks and strategies that are coming in place and that are catching traction. So one is around CSR landscape in terms of the ESG perspective, around trust-based support and trust-based giving. And the last is around adapting and evolving to meet the newer needs. So all the newer needs that are emerging. So what do you think is your take on the CSR landscape?
Let's start with ESG. I think it's a mistake when we try and club CSR and ESG together, just because sometimes teams are common. These two are seen together, but the budgets for the two are radically different. ESG is required first and foremost from an investor perspective. The budgets for ESG come from business budgets. And therefore, ESG has to be demonstrated largely through your business operations, which is the 98% of your profit. CSR is 2% of the profit outside business operations. There's a very strong boundary between the two. I would not club the two. If people have sustainability as a theme in CSR, that is not the same as saying ESG is reflecting on CSR. These are two separate worlds, may have a common owner, but have separate budgets. Second, trust-based giving is a concept which basically says, don't ask me 200 questions because I may not know the answers, because the work that I'm doing does not have every answer ready. Trust me because you're betting on the person more than the organization and the project. And therefore take the first few steps and then you will see the results and then you can take the next one, right? So, but the first few steps are based on trust, not based on data necessarily. As a concept, it applies far better to philanthropy, less to CSR. Much like it's easier to get a loan from a friend based on trust, but not from a bank. The same thing. Which is why startups first raise friends and family, money from friends and family before they go and raise equity, right? People closest to you trust you. HNIs have the ability and philanthropists have the ability to, because they're using their own money, to give on trust, and they lead the trust-based giving movement. Companies are going to find it harder. Every CSR head is also audited. Every CSR project is audited. So giving only on trust may not fly as much. The last one, I am interpreting that to say niche areas, which are not the dominant education, healthcare kind of themes. For example, art. For example, I don't know, music. Like there's a whole bunch of things that get funded in CSR, but are not mainstream. Again, put yourself in the shoes of a CSR head. If you can't connect a theme to your work or to your communities closest to your operations, you're going to find it hard. Why is it that the largest funding for art and preservation comes from banks? Or from conglomerates and not from other sectors? Conglomerates tend to do it because there is always a stronger promoter family behind it. That's the fundamental of a conglomerate, right? Indian conglomerates are family-owned conglomerates. Banks do it because they're dealing with a segment that is a user of those museums and tends to identify with that kind of infrastructure far better. So niche themes will exist, but businesses have to be able to see the connection. Short answer, niche is likely to stay niche. They're not replacing mainstream. Education, health, livelihoods are large for a reason.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask before we get into the last question for this Q&A bit? Okay, if there are no questions, I'll present the last one. And it's around how to garner and nurture the correct CSR support in terms of whether an NGO should focus more on their visibility or their groundwork, their hold on the community. If they should focus on bringing about a mindset shift in whatever area they're working in, along with the CSR as a partner, or whether looking at it from just a programmatic intervention angle. So what does the correct or the more balanced approach of CSR support look like?
So, if you were to ask a question from a young, small company saying, do you focus more on what you're making or on your customer? The answer will be, I need a customer to make something, and vice versa. So I do start with the product, but very quickly I have to move to the customer. Otherwise, the product will have no meaning, right? In case of CSR, in case of development in general, customers are on both sides. It's the communities that you work with as well as your funders. So I don't think you have a choice between impact and fundraising. Both have to happen. One can't last without the other, especially for nonprofits that have to work on an annual cycle, right? You can't carry forward money in a nonprofit structure. So you have to spend every year, raise every year. So there's no choice there. But I would just leave you with a thought on mindset shift. Comes up all the time. Mindset shifts can only be done if you're inside the room. If all the decision makers are in a room with a certain mindset, you want them to have a separate mindset, a different mindset, a newer mindset, a more evolved mindset, but you are outside the room. Then there is no chance that your messaging will ever get across. So my suggestion is, if you believe the mindset that you want to communicate is worth it, you first have to be in the room where the people who you want to communicate it to are present. Sitting outside, you can't change anything. Being in the room requires you to begin with the mindset that exists and find a way to engage with that the way it is today. It can only change after you engage. It can't change by not engaging. And you can't engage if you're outside the room. A lot of the work that we do, also, we have ideas around what is the right way to do things. But the reality is I'm not doing them. The person who's doing them has a perspective, again, coming from actual experience. They're smart people and they're well-meaning people. It's not like they don't know, but they are also trying to do something which they believe is right. So if you want to make change, you have to be inside. And you have to start from where things are. So mindset shifts is, at least for me, that's what's worked. And it's a slow process. No, I mean, nonprofits know that better than anybody else.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. Surprised 45 people have the stamina to stay through this.
last chance for anybody to ask any questions to both Sumit and Aditi here. We have Shweta's hand raised. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah, sir, when we do the submission about the document to the CSR, so each CSR have different document list for each of them. For example, recently CSR 1 is one of the mandatory, CSR 1 form is one of the
Yeah.
mandatory document. But one of the CSR ask about you need to submit the registration form along with the CSR 1 form. There will be the, when you apply for the CSR 1 form, you can submit the registration form as well. So there is any mandate or any kind of checklist ki this can be applied. These are the common set of document which is are mandatory, and other document is not mandatory. There is any compliant under the CSR
There
policy?
isn't. There isn't, Shweta, and that is why everybody will ask what they think is the right thing to ask. If there
Right.
was a standard checklist, then everybody would follow it, and which would actually make life easier for all of us. But that's not the
Yeah.
case. So individual companies make individual judgments. Individual procurement teams and finance teams influence that judgment far more than the CSR team actually for their own audit requirements. And therefore, I agree, it does tend to be quite haphazard.
So what was the best solution to negotiate with the CSR on those grounds?
Don't have a good answer. Because you can't negotiate. I would be surprised in general if they're asking it just because they want to ask it. Most likely it's come from their finance or procurement team.
Okay.
So they need to negotiate internally more than you for any of it to change.
Yeah, because sometime what happened, sir, instead of that document submission, your application not move to the second steps.
No, I empathize with you, but don't have a good answer for it.
Okay. Thank you.
Archana is asking for any tips for small nonprofits for pitching to CSR funds.
Keep at it. No, Archana, there's no magic trick. There isn't any straightforward shortcut, simple way to do this, except the hard way of how any sales process works. You have to keep at it, and then it clicks once in a while.
If there are no more questions, I think we can close the session here. Thank you so much, Sumit. I think we've had a really lovely discussion, a very insightful session, and a lot of questions coming in. I hope everybody who's participated today, your questions, your queries have been answered in some way or the other. And you'll be receiving a post-session email where you'll have the recording of the webinar along with the report and any other resources that were mentioned during the session. You'll have all of that go into your registered email ID. And before you drop off from the call, would request you to please fill out the feedback form. It helps us understand what you've experienced or how the session has been for you. So please do fill in the feedback form. We also have a dipstick survey that's going about. One second, I'm just sharing the link to that here as well. It would be, one second. Yeah, I've just shared it. And if you'd like, please participate in the this compensation benchmarking study. And I'll share this with the post-session email that will go. So you'll have all the links in the email. Don't worry about it. And yes, this has been quite, I think, the longest Q&A session, at least this year, where we've had a lot of questions, a lot of discussion. So really, really great and really glad and thank you. Very thankful to Sumit for taking us through it, answering all our questions, and beautifully explaining all of it, breaking down each aspect of all the questions.
Thank you, Belshi. Thank you for putting this together, and thanks, Atma team, for bringing us all together here.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.